I remember sitting on the edge of a hotel bed in Chicago, somewhere in my late 50s, staring at an empty plastic water bottle on the nightstand. It was 3 in the morning. My mouth was entirely dry, my head was heavy, and I was exhausted in a way that sleep never seemed to fix. But the physical fatigue was not the worst part of that night. The worst part was the quiet, heavy realization that my body was no longer doing what it was supposed to do. I was a sales executive for most of my adult life. I lived on airplanes, rental cars, and adrenaline. For a long time, I operated under the assumption that if I just drank enough water and pushed through the stress, the machine would keep running. I actually prided myself on my discipline. I carried a large bottle of water everywhere I went. I drank glass after glass of plain water every single day. I thought I was flushing out my system. I thought I was maintaining my infrastructure. But the truth was, the more plain water I drank, the more depleted I felt. And it was not just a matter of afternoon energy crashes. It was everything. It was the way my muscles felt tight and restricted all the time. It was the way the morning physical response I used to take for granted had just quietly, gradually disappeared. Many men are not broken. We are just ignoring the wrong things. I assumed that losing physical response and blood flow was just a contract we all signed when we crossed the 50-year mark. I did not want to talk about it. I definitely did not want to talk about it with my wife, Alyssa. She is 9 years younger than me, she is direct, and she values emotional honesty above almost everything else. I was used to managing situations and closing deals, not admitting that my own physical foundation was cracking, so I kept quiet. I drank my plain water. I tried to exercise a little more when my joints allowed it, and I watched my confidence slowly drain away. When your body stops responding the way you expect it to, it changes how you walk into a room. It changes how you look at your partner. The distance between Alyssa and me started to grow, not because we were fighting, but because I was avoiding the invisible elephant in the room. I was creating excuses to stay up late reading emails just to avoid going to bed at the same time. The shame was entirely silent. What I did not understand back then, and what took me years to finally figure out, is that what starts in the body usually ends up in the head. My body was essentially running on empty, not because I lacked fluid, but because I lacked the electrical charge to actually use that fluid. I was talking to an old friend of mine here in Scottsdale who spent his life working on high-performance car engines. We were standing in his garage looking at a motor he was rebuilding, and he was explaining why a flooded engine refuses to turn over. He told me that you can pump all the high-grade fuel you want into the chamber, but if the spark plugs are dead, nothing ignites. The fuel just washes everything out and sits there uselessly. That casual conversation hit me harder than I expected. I realized I was flooding my own system with plain water, but I had completely stripped my body of the minerals it needed to actually hold that hydration and keep my blood vessels open. When we pass 50, our systems do not process things the same way. The internal pipelines get rigid, the plumbing gets tight. I started doing my own reading and learned that drinking massive amounts of plain water by itself was actually flushing out the exact minerals my body desperately needed to keep my circulation strong and my tissues relaxed. I was hydrated on paper, but my cells were suffocating. The first thing I realized I was missing was the element that tells the vascular system to relax. I learned that without enough magnesium, our arteries are constantly under tension, like a rubber hose that is permanently pinched half shut. That made complete sense to me. My whole body felt pinched, so I started adding a small amount of a specific powder to my morning water, just a half teaspoon of a high-quality magnesium. I did not expect much to happen. But within a few weeks, the tension in my chest and my legs started to ease. The physical anxiety I used to wake up with began to quiet down. And more importantly, the blood flow that I thought was gone for good started to return, slowly but noticeably. It felt exactly like taking the parking brake off a car that had been struggling to move forward. But opening the pipes was not enough if the fluid was just passing straight through me. I noticed I was still running to the bathroom constantly, still waking up feeling like I had walked through a desert. That was when I realized I needed a gatekeeper. I started putting just a tiny pinch of real, unrefined pink salt into my first glass of water every morning. Not the heavily processed white stuff you find on diner tables, but real salt. It sounded entirely counterintuitive. We spend our whole lives hearing that salt restricts blood flow and damages the heart. But I found out that in its natural, untouched form, it is the exact mechanism that allows water to actually enter the cells instead of just washing right over them. That one small change shifted my entire morning. I stopped feeling that hollow, dehydrated fatigue by mid-afternoon. I felt steady. My body finally had permission to hold on to the strength I was trying to give it. I did not stop there. Once I saw my own body responding, once I felt that physical morning evidence that my system was coming back online, I added the final pieces to the routine. I started putting a scoop of a clean electrolyte powder in my water after my afternoon walks, something heavy in potassium. I learned potassium works right alongside the salt to balance out the pressure in the pipes and keep the heart rhythm smooth. And finally, I added a few drops of liquid zinc to my water once a day. Zinc is the quiet manager of a man's hormone production. It protects the prostate and keeps the fuel lines clean. As we get older, we stop absorbing it from our food the way we used to. Putting it directly into my daily water routine was the easiest way to ensure the engine block had what it needed to maintain drive and stamina. I made these changes quietly. I did not make a grand announcement in the kitchen, but the shift in my physiology became impossible to hide. Confiança volta quando o corpo começa a responder de novo. It changes the way you stand in the kitchen while making coffee. It changes the way you hold a conversation. Alyssa noticed it long before I ever brought it up. We were sitting on the patio one evening, watching the sun go down over the McDowell Mountains, and she just looked at me and said that I felt different. She said I felt present in a way I had not been in a very long time. She was not just talking about our physical life behind closed doors, although that part of our marriage had completely transformed. The hesitation was gone. The performance anxiety that had quietly eaten away at me for years had dissolved, simply because the plumbing was finally working the way it was designed to work. But beyond that, she was talking about the energy I carried in our home. I was not guarding myself anymore. I was not hiding behind the permanent excuse of just being tired. Most men wait entirely too long to face what has changed in their bodies. I know I did. We pour plain water into a depleted engine, we push ourselves to the point of exhaustion, and we wonder why our performance drops and why the physical connection with our wives feels so much harder to maintain. You are not the only man dealing with this. The machine is not broken. It is just asking for a different kind of maintenance. It took me a long time and a lot of quiet frustration to understand that if you have crossed the half-century mark, circulation matters significantly more than pride. I still drink plenty of water every single day. I just make sure it actually has the spark needed to ignite the engine. I add the magnesium in the morning to open the pipes. I use the real salt to hold the charge. I balance it with potassium and protect the system with zinc. It takes me maybe 2 extra minutes a day. I am not saying I have every single thing in my life figured out perfectly, but my body is responding again. The pipelines are open and the atmosphere in my house feels entirely different. We are just getting started.